Hello, I am Vivian Showalter, and I'm here representing the Adult Education and Spiritual Formation Committee at Montview today, as we host a series called Elections in the Time of Pandemic. Can we talk? Today is our fourth session. The idea for the series evolved from the concern for the deepening divides in our culture, our society, neighborhoods, and indeed often our own families over our country's political climate, with a backdrop, of course, of a pandemic. So the committee reached out to various experts to seek their wisdom on how to maneuver through these paths sometimes fraught with difficult obstacles and help us to see ways to still connect, even when it seems impossible. I'm very pleased to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Christine Cho. She has spoken in the past about race relations at Montview, and we're thrilled to have her back. Dr. Cho is a licensed director and interim executive director of the Asian Pacific Development Center in Aurora. Chris has also been an adjunct clinical supervisor at DU and has taught at the Iliff School of Theology, the University of Denver, as well as the University of Colorado at Denver. Dr. Cho's interests are reflected in her clinical practice, in a variety of publications, and numerous professional presentations and workshops. The interests include multiracial identity formation, Asian mental health, and the significance and function of ancestral altars and myths. She also has conducted many workshops on cultural diversity. We're extremely grateful to have her with us today to speak to us on Polarized, Torn Apart, but Still Seeking a Beloved Community. Welcome, Chris. So good to have you.
Thank you, Vivian. I'm very happy to be here and very honored, and thank you for that lovely introduction. And actually, I was the past executive director and clinical director of Asian Pacific. I can't volunteer now, but thank you. So I'm very happy to be here. I'm very honored. My associations with Montview Presbyterian Church actually go way back. My eldest stepson, who now has 4 children himself, went to Montview Presbyterian Preschool, and our youngest daughter also went there and had fabulous teachers, Jean, Mary Jo, and Shirley. And that's how I got to know the children of the Showalters and the Ackermans and the Barretts and the Coopers and Cindy Curley's kids. And of course, I got to know their fabulous parents. And if some of you also had kids in Montview Preschool back at that area, I'm sure we still sell flower bulbs. And if you remember the yearly carnival with the human jukebox, that was manned by my fellow psychologist, Hal Lewis. And actually, I found in my files that in 1996, in your bulletin, it was announced that Dr. Lewis was going to talk on March 17th on raising G-rated children in an X-rated world. And at the same time, as Vivian noted, under the auspices of Improving Race Relations Peace and Justice Task Force, my husband, Art Jones, and I were going to speak on interracial relations. So I have no notes. I have no idea what we talked about, but I think in that series, you also invited Dr. Rachel Knoll and the wonderful principal, Martha Uriosti. I also, thinking of Montview, I also came to know the Talmadges through their daughter, Dr. Marilyn Talmadge Bowers, who I first met right after graduate school when we both worked as psychologists for Kaiser, and our friendship continues till today. So I'm very happy. Thank you. But anyway, when Vivian suggested that she submit my name to the committee putting this together, I was both reluctant and intrigued, because I thought, well, maybe if I really grappled with the topic, I would figure this polarization thing out. And I've really wanted, and I really do want to figure it out. After all, I told myself, well, I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm a Jungian analyst, and I actually just completed a 2-year course of study at the Living School out of the Center for Action and Contemplation in Albuquerque, where I've had these fabulous teachers, the feminist theologian and mystic, Reverend Cynthia Bourgeot, Dr. James Finley, a clinical psychologist, also a mystic and scholar and a protege of Thomas Merton, and the Franciscan on the edge of the Roman Catholic tent, Richard Rohr. And they've also actually just added two wonderful teachers, Barbara Holmes, an African-American theologian and also a contemplative mystic, and Brian McLaren, who I think has written prophetically about everything. I'm just saying this to you in case any of you would like to investigate the Living School. And actually, I sometimes think I need to re-enroll because I don't think I've gotten it. But because of all this, this is true confession from my Roman Catholic background, I don't think I have any answers for you. So now everybody can leave and have Instacart bring you something from Snooze and have a wonderful brunch. And also, I started doubting myself because I know you've had some very wonderful speakers, as Vivian said in the preceding weeks, including Bowie Sewell and Amanda Henderson and Diana DeGette. And finally, I know that Marilyn Ackerman and Rebecca Gale are teaching a 3-part class on becoming anti-racist, our calling as people of faith. So I'm thinking, what do I have to tell you? Basically, this gives you a clue as to how I approach things. I want to tell you how I have navigated this. So all of this is to say, all this stuff, all these things you've been doing, this is enough to give a person a whopping inferiority complex. So let's start there with some Jungian psychology and see how Carl Jung talked about complexes and what this might tell us about our being polarized today. Now, Freud also talked about complexes, but he mostly concerned himself about the Oedipal complex, whereas C.G. Jung suggests you could have as many complexes as could dance on the head of a pin. Now, this is a very simplistic difference, but okay, never mind. So let me tell you a definition. A complex is a feeling state. It's an emotional state, and Jung says it's autonomous and stands alone outside ourselves, if you will, and the complex, has us. We don't have it. It's like a psychological monkey on our back, but we are unconscious of this monkey. We are also often blithely unaware of what it feeds on, how it becomes more entrenched in our personality. So our job throughout life is to make ourselves aware of these complexes and also become aware of when and where they will ambush us. I will also posit that cultures can have complexes, which I'll get to in a minute. But first, let's go back to my personal inferiority complex, which kicked in just after I agreed to do this talk. It can also go by the name of, and you guys have heard this, imposter complex or imposter syndrome, which is just another name for the same thing. Okay. With complexes, whether it is a personal one or a collective complex of the culture, there are a number of things we need to try and to become aware of. That is, what it feels like, what does it make one do, where does it come from, where can we locate its origins. Also, it can make you feel terrible, okay, in terms of feelings. It can make you feel terrible and inferior, and you say to yourself, oh, let me tell Monfio, I can't do this. I have to wash my hair, okay? In fact, my feelings when I'm caught in the grip of a complex can feel so yucky that I will unconsciously do a defensive flip and feel exactly the opposite. So instead of feeling inferior, I'll feel superior. I'm going to give the best damn talk that they ever had. I don't think so. It's still a complex, whether it's positive or negative. It's just the other pole of it. So on the one hand, I could either feel deflated, stupid, and dumb, or caught in the grip of a complex. I'll feel inflated and super smart and superior to all my unenlightened neighbors, my fellow people in the pew, etc., etc. Neither is helpful to you, certainly, or actually to me. And most importantly, it's not the real me. Nor when we are caught in the complex, is it the real you? And I don't bring the real me to whatever I'm engaging in. Okay, second, what can a complex make one do? Us do? Well, you can become tongue-tied, forget you knew anything, and so anxious you become incoherent. Or on the other end, if you're inflated, you can become pompous and boring, never noticing that your audience has all fallen asleep. Either way, what you have to come to offer is lost, not helpful to really anyone, your audience, your neighbors, your fellow worshipers, your friends, and most importantly, not the real you. Then finally, where do all these complexes come from? I believe the answer is life. All the pain, psychological pain, and the real pain, all the disappointments and heartache we've suffered, our smart little egos, basically the CEOs of our life, chuck everything overboard into the depths of the ocean, into the depths of the unconscious, hoping it will never resurface. But resurface they do, and they catch us, usually unawares. Many of our complexes can be traced to the pain we have experienced in our childhood. And I'm saying this not to bash our parents, because they were dealing with their own pain and difficulties and disappointments and complexes from their parents who were dealing with what their parents struggled with. Complexes often have long ancestral lines, and you can think of them sort of like those nesting Russian dolls. So let's go back to my inferiority complex that started getting activated, preparing to ambush me when I heard all the speakers that you were having in this series. Well, I grew up with a father who told us implicitly and very explicitly that we had to be twice as smart as everyone else, and that before we even questioned a teacher or someone higher up than we had better know everything in the book. This was my Chinese father who converted to Catholicism in China. And so I could relate to the one Asian character who was on the TV show Glee, who says an A- is the Asian equivalent of an F, or an A- is an Asian F. So, like nesting dolls, my inferiority complex is nested in a whopping father complex. And guess what? We all probably have some variations of father complexes and mother complexes, and probably both. And maybe there are some Napoleon complexes out there, or power complexes, or Mother Teresa complexes. We think we're going to save the world, okay? As I have come to understand this complex and have worked on it, a lot of therapy, though therapy, I believe, is not the only way to work on oneself. But as I work, it's not quite as powerful as it once was, though it can always still rear its ugly little head. And as I become more and more aware of my complexes, I'm a little more freed up to be a little more authentic, a little more me, and energy is freed up. So I can say to my complex, okay, you go outside and have a nice quarantini while I talk at Montview. And maybe the folks at Montview will find it interesting, or maybe they'll find it boring, but that's okay. You, Christine, do not have to come up with a perfect solution to unpolarize everyone and show everyone the way to a beloved community. Okay? And As I should mention here, both men and women can have mother and father complexes. In fact, Jung can be a little tautological in that sometimes everything can seem to be able to be reduced to a mother or father complex. So let me give you guys another example. For example, maybe there's a mother complex lurking around with its origins in one sainted mother or grandmother that tells you, oh, you should always be giving and caring and not cause any conflict. And thus, you're just not going to be bothered by these politicians or politics. Or maybe a positive mother complex has convinced you that you are God's gift to the world. And as mother's little darling, you can do no wrong. My point is that we can get stuck or caught by our own individual complexes, and they can be one cause of our polarization, because complexes often make us stubborn, righteous, recalcitrant. They make us dig in our heels, or they can also cause us to withdraw or feel afraid or feel complacent, not wanting to upset the apple cart. Jung says that the only reason for having complexes is that they are the royal road to individuation. Individuation is our journey to our true self, to the you of you. It's the journey to become aware of your unique psychological personality with all of its pluses and all of its minuses, which journey does not end until we die. And maybe it continues after that, I don't know. If I could use somewhat theological language, it is the journey to the you that God is constantly loving into being, the you of you. Okay, that God is constantly loving us into being, even when we don't want that. So if we were meeting in person, or if I could see you, I'd say, turn to your neighbor and say to each other, you know, I've got some complexes I'm needing to become aware of. And then your neighbor would say to you, you know, I've got some complexes I'm needing to become aware of. Okay, thank you. And if we were meeting in a group and we had question and answers, I would ask those of us who normally speak more often, like I love the sound of my own voice complex, to try and commit to practicing the art of speaking less. And to those of us who rarely speak, I don't have anything to say complex, you can try and commit to practicing the art of speaking more. So, okay, now in addition to having our own complexes, cultures can have complexes, and we operate within them often blind, unaware, and asleep as to what they are and how they influence us. So let me give you a few definitions. Cultural complexes are based on repetitive historical group experiences which have taken root in the cultural unconscious of that particular group. At any ripe time, those slumbering cultural complexes can be activated in the cultural unconscious and can take hold of the collective psyche of the group, as well as the individual and collective psyche of the individual members of the group. The inner sociology of these cultural complexes can seize the imagination, the behavior, and the emotions of the collective psyche and unleash tremendous irrational forces in the name of their logic. Okay. We can see Germany taken over by complexes. We can see ourselves taken over by complexes. Thus, it may seem trivial, but we see cultural complexes such as, don't you tell me to wear a mask. And we can also see wearing a mask is absolutely necessary. And we can be entrenched and polarized in those two positions. Political correctness is often a cultural complex. And my hope is perhaps we can become more aware of this complex and we can see at its heart the archetype of compassion, such that perhaps PC can come one day to mean personally compassionate. Finally, of course, race is a huge cultural complex in America, of which all of us have varying degrees of awareness. Um, Not to go into it too deeply, I believe we have a Black Lives Matter complex going on. We've had a model minority complex going on with Asian folks that's being changed into a Kung flu virus complex right before our eyes. We have a rapist disease bringers complex. Again, I just ask you to think about what other cultural complexes might be operating around race. Um, High school students can really demonstrate how easy it is to become caught in complexes. You know, when high school students will say they know they're the stoners, and then they're the cool kids, and then they're I don't know what the current words are today. All those are complexes that can catch you as you're trying to figure out who you are. It's almost like you allow yourself to be caught in those complexes for a while. Back in the 60s, it was the long hair. I'm never going to cut my hair complex, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, the next Jungian concept I would like to explore with you a little is that of the shadow, because I do think this concept also helps us to explain the dynamic of polarization. We all have shadow aspects of ourselves, which are those hidden or unaware aspects of ourselves, both good and bad, which again, our ego has either repressed or never even recognized. Shadow aspects of ourselves can show up in dreams, and let me give you two examples. For example, I once had a dream of a fellow graduate student, and my therapist analyst asked me, "So, what do you make of her?" And I said, "Oh, she's bossy, always had to be right, and a know-it-all." And he looked at me and said, "So, Chris, what part of you is just like that?" And I was like, "Me? Oh, no, no, no. I'm patient and sweet and humble and however, wait a minute. I absolutely can be very bossy and a know-it-all." And I hope that complex isn't showing too much. One can get very embarrassed when our shadow is showing.
Mm.
But the dream was suggesting this part of me was something I ought to become aware of. A shadow aspect part of you can also be positive. So here's another dream. I have a friend, not in this state, who's a lawyer, who kind of often puts herself down and lets other people walk all over her. Well, she had a dream that she was in a class for new district attorneys and Kamala Harris was her teacher. When she said what she thought about her associations to Senator Harris were that, oh my heavens, she was smart and strong and great, and DAs were the ones who persecuted people trying to harm others. So it was very clear, you don't need to be a rocket scientist, that she needed some of that positive shadow energy that Kamala Harris symbolized. Like, go out in the world, like you've got a little Kamala Harris inside you, okay? Thus, people can hold shadow aspects of them. Thus, also other people can hold shadow aspects of ourselves. And often those people we don't like hold aspects of ourselves with which we are very uncomfortable. This is what the Michael Jackson song sang about the man in the mirror. And let me quote the lyrics. "I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. And no message could have been clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make a change." Next, it is important to note that groups can hold shadow aspects for the community, and all those things we don't like become projected onto those other groups. We scapegoat them. You all know this. And we do this even though we say we don't want to, and our scriptures tell us not to. The famous lines from Exodus, you shall neither mistreat a stranger nor oppress him, for you are strangers in the land of Egypt. And then Matthew has Jesus saying about those who are going to inherit the kingdom, for I was hungry and you gave me food, I was thirsty and you gave me drink, a stranger and you welcomed me. I can think that can be the stranger within us as well as the stranger outside. So then, of course, who is the stranger in our midst right now? So it has also been a long time, if ever, that we have heard phrases like no pigs or Irish in the parlor. I said I wasn't going to talk too much about race, but I am sure we all know every racial and ethnic slur in current use today. The no Irish in the or pigs in the parlor. I remember my mother telling me that my Irish grandmother remembered encountering. So we all know every racial and ethnic slur that's in current use today. And I believe that our reluctance to confront those slurs or to bring them up in our families or to talk about them with our children is because they hold the power of the fear of the other or the foreigner, which is actually the fear of that foreigner or the other in ourselves. Out of this fear or inner polarization comes our reluctance to not want X, Y, or maybe if we like X, Y, then maybe Z people living next to us, teaching our children. And those XYZ people can be people with mental illness. They can be people with disabilities. They can be people of another faith, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes we want to save, educate, and sometimes baptize those other people, or maybe we want to have dinner with them, but we never imagine ourselves being them, okay? So here's a very interesting exercise that I was asked to do many years ago by the Jungian analyst Arnie Mindell. And he had us break into pairs, and we each were to tell the other person about a politician we totally could not stand, a politician we hated. And after that, we each took turns listing all the reasons why we disliked the person. We were then, here's the kicker, we were then told to tell our partner the parts of ourselves that were like this hated politician. So, where is my inner Trump? Where is my inner Biden? Where is my inner John Hickenlooper? Where is my inner Cory Gardner? And how do I consciously or unconsciously act that out? Arnie Mindell would say that all the various parts in a conflict are actually roles or positions that everyone has within themselves to a lesser or greater extent. The positions taken by the other belong not just to them, but to all of us. So then our challenge is, can we take a deep dive into ourselves and hopefully gain a little bit of space and distance in order to dialogue with those parts within ourselves? Or to put it another way, can we engage in role switching to see if we can gain new insights, new experience to begin to recognize our shared humanity? The goal is to grow in awareness and understand the parts within ourselves that are afraid and don't feel safe. I'm afraid I'll be called a racist. I'm afraid to tell Grandpa at Thanksgiving I'm gay. I'm afraid to tell my own mother and father that my child is transgender. I'm afraid to tell my mother, my father, my pastor, I've had an abortion. I really would wish group X, Y, or Z would just calm down. Or, back to Thanksgiving, I don't want to sit next to my narcissistic borderline sister-in-law, brother-in-law, etc., etc. Okay? As we become aware of the voices inside us, hopefully we will become aware in a new way about those real folks outside us that aren't allowed to say or not are not fully represented. Then I believe we are on our way to slowly building that beloved community, which bestows in love a sense of belonging, a sense of meaning, as we realize we rest on each other's shoulders. We are all interdependent. And I also believe we can bring our ancestors along also, because many of our ancestors are in need of a truth and reconciliation process. To do this, we will need insight, awareness, and, oh boy, gobs and gobs of compassion, especially compassion poured all over us like thick, delicious maple syrup. Okay, so now let me wrap up and suggest some practical proposals that you and another, be that your friend or family member, can agree on as ground rules when you find yourselves on seemingly opposite sides. Will we all achieve the wonderful friendships of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Antonin Scalia, or John McCain and Joe Biden? I don't know. And I wish for those who had died, we could have really dug into what made those friendships. But I think we all have some clues. Deepak Chopra suggests that it is very important that we learn about each other's values, and he actually starts very slow. So he does a lot of conflict resolution, and when he has been asked to resolve conflicts with people, he said, I tell them to go out and have Chinese food together. For us, it's maybe Chinese takeout over Zoom. That's okay, Chinese food is good. So I tell them to go out and have lunch, have Chinese food together, and talk about their mother or their father or their teenage years. Something that shows you are a regular human being and that you can also be vulnerable. Okay. Sometimes I will ask couples that come in, of course, very angry with each other, tell each other what made you fall in love with the other person, or tell each other how you came to fall in love with him, with her. Another thing Chopra noted, and this is actually from a New York Times article, September 30th of this year, parts of which were reprinted in an abridged form in the Denver Post on October 11th. Well, in this article, he says, you can slap another person figuratively and they might forgive you. But if you prove them wrong, they'll never forgive you. It's like, wow. So, but think about it. We teach our kids, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And that is so backwards, and that is nuts, and it's wrong. And every kid and the child part in all of us knows it's garbage. Words can hurt terribly and can have lasting scars. Proving someone wrong is psychologically defeating them. And it may feel right or good for us in a moment to leave them in the dust, but the other person is left feeling injured, diminished, and it is very difficult for them to come to you and negotiate when they feel in a one-down position. A large part is because this one-down position breeds resentment. Marilyn Robinson recently wrote, actually it was in the New York Times, again, Sunday, October 11th, resentment is insatiable. It thrives on deprivation. sustaining itself by magnifying grievances. It will, by its nature, never resolve. That's a big warning to us. Some other things to think about. In our hearts, we have to agree that each person has something to offer. And out of that inner agreement, we then listen and listen and listen, and maybe listen some more, without preconceived expectations of what the other will say. Because remember, we would love to have someone listen and listen and listen to us and to our grievances and resentments. If we were here in person, which I would so love to be, I'd have you get into groups of 3 or 4 and give you some conflict situations with which to practice. But I'm going to do that anyway. I got these from 2 advice columns, Ask Amy, written by Amy Dickinson, and you can read her in the Denver Post right next to the comic page, and Social Cues, written by Philip, I think you say his name, Galanes of the New York Times. And what I would tell you is to take turns being the person asking the questions of the columnist and the implied other person who is being written about. Since we can't be together, I'm going to tell you the situation and suggest that you pick one situation, maybe 2 if you really want to be courageous or adventurous. Well, but pick a situation and over dinner tonight, share them. Each person playing a different part or role in the situation, but also being mindful, and maybe you could discuss later, what the shadow aspects might be underneath the predicament and what complexes could be in play. So here is situation number 1, if you take this mission impossible. Okay. So this is the first letter. Thanks to political correctness, I can no longer converse freely with my 3 adult children. I live in the South. They've scattered across the country. I think I'm a good person. No one has ever called me racist except my children. When I was young, my parents hung a Confederate flag in our home. I remember it fondly because I remember them fondly. Recently, our town removed a Confederate statue from our cemetery. When I lament these changes, my children get furious with me, but it's my opinion. I also believe Black people deserve equal rights. Doesn't freedom of speech exist anymore? Signed, Mother. So, if you choose this, someone take the part of the mother and someone take the part of one of the 3 adult children. And if you have kids, maybe they can join the conversation and play the grandkids of their grandmother who lives in the South. Okay? Here's the next situation. If you want to pick this one. This is from Ask Amy Dickinson. I have always assumed that my hairstylist of many years and I didn't see eye to eye on most political issues, but we kept our talk to personal lives and movies and TV shows. She's a genuinely nice person, and I'm certain she's kind to everyone. Then, on social media, she attacked a politician I truly admire. I just can't go back to her as if nothing had happened. I just can't go back at all. Should I ghost her? Or should I tell her that I'm switching stylists and why? I don't really want to make her feel bad because she's not a bad person. We just disagree. Signed, Going Gray. You can see me. So, someone play the role of the hairstylist, and no, we don't know who the politician is, and that's not the point, of course. And then the other person plays the person who's going gray. Or if we want to flip it and make it male, one person is the barber, and the writer is a guy whose hair is growing so long he's afraid he'll be mistaken for a hippie. Okay? So that's the second example folks could talk about. And then here's the last one. And this is from the New York Times. My husband, our tween son, and I moved into a new house at the beginning of the year. We didn't meet our neighbors before the pandemic hit. We still haven't. After the horrible police shooting of Jacob Blake last week, our son made a beautiful Black Lives Matter poster and asked if he could display it on our lawn. We were proud to. A few days later, our neighbors seemed to respond with a Blue Lives Matter sign on their lawn. It hurts our hearts when we see it. Were we wrong to put up our son's lawn sign? Can we talk to the neighbors about theirs? No signature. This would be a great discussion if you have teens in your house. You could have 3 role plays going on. So I will leave you with these thoughts and some homework, if you will, as we all struggle and inch our way towards a beloved community. Thank you, Vivian, and thank you, everybody else.
Thank you, Chris. It was wonderful to have you. Didn't know I was going to get homework, but it certainly will provide interesting dinner conversation. Thanks so much for being here with us today.
Okay, bye-bye.